Hi, everyone. This is Kenneth Hover, and welcome to another guided meditation for the monthly empowerment series. Today, we're working on how to alchemically transform grief. And we're transforming grief into not only its pure essence, but we're letting it transform us as well. And so, when working with grief, I think one of the main important factors that for me starts the alchemical process is that I'm not trying to transform the grief first. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to let it transform me. I'm trying to let the grief transform my heart, deepen my humanity. I'm trying to have it let me know why it's here first. And to do that, what we need to do first is like have the appropriate resources, have our emotional body, have our nervous system really trust us to work with an emotion that can be really big. I was kind of sharing a little bit earlier, but grief can feel really sticky. It can be an emotion that we can feel scared to touch it, to let it kind of like wash over us. And certainly we can be kind of scared to share it with other people or to hear other people's grief. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to resource. And to do this, we're going to start by creating a group container. And so we're going to do this by first just kind of breathing, thinking of all of the people here on this call or listening to this as a recording. But even bigger, let's imagine everyone who would like to know how to work with grief. Everyone who's committed to growing as a human being, as a person. And as we make that kind of container, which I imagine is like a bubble, let's call on some earth energies to come up. And as these earth energies come up and they start to support this energy bubble, we'll call on some universal energies as well. And then let's begin to kind of speak some intentions into this group container. And these intentions can be for ourselves and also for the group. And so examples of these could be having this be a group space of just deep witnessing, of deep respect and reverence for one another. Having be a space of celebrating life, celebrating goodness, kindness, love. And then individually, we might set intentions for what we hope to gain from listening to this, from participating in it. Sometimes I like to even imagine that all of the people who I wish I could invite to this meditation or who I wish I could share these energies with, I kind of like put a little picture of them in the group container, or like a little drop of their energy. So if they want to, they can also kind of benefit from this process. And again, we're using this to transform our grief. So let's imagine like we can call our guides in, and even we can call on guides that are, let's say, like experts on working with grief. And then now we're gonna support our own individual field. So let's call on a brand new grounding cord. And as this grounding cord comes up, let's imagine it first holds all of the structures that are in our field, all of the relationships in our field. And we're going to allow our inner wisdom and our essence to identify the structures that are ready to release, the ones that are no longer working, no longer valid. We're in a moment in time that our world is rapidly transforming, rapidly changing. So we're just taking the time to kind of examine and as we begin to release these structures, just notice if there's any grief, any sense of loss, as the things that used to be true are no longer maybe true or no longer present. Examples of this could be certain community spaces, certain aspects of ourselves, relationships. And as we begin to hold that grief, we're going to give it space. If it feels too big, we can imagine we put it in a bubble outside of us. And if it's in a bubble outside of us, we can kind of work with it and bring energies in. If you're keeping it in your body, which both function well, just keep allowing it to fill up space. And we're gonna have that brand new grounding cord that we brought. We're gonna have it hold that grief fully. I always like to imagine that the earth energy, when it holds difficult emotions, kind of like whispers to them that they're important, that they're beautiful, that they're worthy of love, that they matter. And as we're holding this grief, we're going to allow whatever of this grief is ready to release into the earth to be composted, to be held, to be transformed. And we're releasing it not because we aren't going to transform it, we're releasing it because we're just not going to hold it in our body. We're still going to transform it, but there might be more skillful techniques that we'll work on in a little bit. And as we're holding this grief with, with whatever components we're ready to release, we're going to start tuning in and asking this grief for what it needs. What does it need from us? Maybe we can ask the question of, who is it inviting us to become? And if we feel constriction with this grief, we're just going to keep giving it more and more space. If we feel our heart closing around the grief, we're just going to keep increasing the permission for our heart to hold it fully. Good. We're going to bring some bigger resources in. So let's imagine we put a magnet in front of us and behind us so that we release energies into them. And as those magnets fill up with energy, we're going to drop those into the center of the earth. We're then going to call on a sparkly golden orb. We're going to use it to recall our authentic energies, along with any soul fragments, any identity fragments. And these aspects are going to be blessed, healed, enhanced, evolved, and then beamed in from the bottom of our feet to the top of our head. And we're going to allow, if there's any other structures, identity structures, belief structures, reality structures, if any other are ready to release, we're going to give them permission to release into the earth. And we're going to allow our inner wisdom and essence to bring in brand new identity structures, allowing our self-concept to evolve. Allowing our reality and our belief structures to evolve. And now we're going to tune back into the grief. And this time, let's imagine that if our heart could open to match that grief. If instead of letting it be really big and us really small, imagine that we can open our heart so that we can fully hold it. And so just kind of tune in to see, what does your heart need to trust and to show up for this grief. Examples of this is maybe our heart needs to know that doing its best is enough, that no one's perfect at these things. Sometimes I tell myself that it's okay to let my heart break, to not know. Sometimes I just real talk with myself and I'm just like, can you love this person? Of course, you should feel grief. That's appropriate. That's normal. Just see, what does your heart need in order to show up fully. And let's imagine that we tune back into that earth energy and that universal energy. And they offer any support our heart needs. And we can even tune back into that group container. Again, almost a community space of folks committed to growth, committed to healing, evolving, showing up for one another. And now that we've let this grief transform us, we're going to start to tune in to see how we can support it, how we can evolve our relationship to it and like gather its lessons. So now let's ask this grief whatever questions sound sweet and fun. We can ask it, what does it need from us? How can we support it? I like to imagine that each emotion has hopes and dreams. Let's bring different energies in for this grief. So I like to bring earth and universal energies in, and I like to let the grief know that it can ask from the earth and universe for whatever it wants, whatever it needs. And then I like to bring elemental energies in. So we can start by washing over this grief with earth energies. And this allows for any heavy, stuck, intense energies to release. We can then invite really healing, nourishing water. Really allowing like that softness, the resilience, the relief that can come from that element. Inviting the element of fire. And allowing transform that grief if there's anything it wants to release, any things it wants to transmute. And finally, bringing the element of wind, just allowing for anything else that wants to release to get to do so. And then I like to imagine that we make a big spa for this grief. So imagine this grief gets to get massages, it gets to sit in a natural hot spring. We might put like 5, 6 layers of bodyguards, just giving this grief full permission to get to feel totally safe, totally valuable. Giving it full permission to be cared for, celebrated. Let's ask one more time for that earth and universal cord of energy to come in. And we can allow this grief to ask from the earth and universe for whatever energies it wants and needs. And now we're going to give permission for our grief to evolve, to transform. And this transformed grief, it might be that we were holding some of it for our ancestral lineage, for our family, for many other people. And so, if appropriate, if there's any of this grief that's been transformed that we want to offer, make available to people, we can give it permission. I like to imagine it sits outside of their aura and they can pull it in if they're ready. And this transformed grief can support them in their path. And then we're going to imagine that this brand new emotion, this brand new energy, however much is for us, We can allow it to absorb and integrate into our aura. And one more time, we're going to put a magnet in front of us and behind us to release all of the blocks, stuck energies, even any like limiting beliefs, any other people's judgments. They all get to release into those magnets, making space for this new energy. And then we're going to clear our grounding cord and bring up a brand new grounding cord. And as this brand new grounding cord touches the bottom of our feet, really allow for each of our energy centers to be held and supported by this earth energy. And as that alchemically transformed grief integrates, feel the earth celebrating our growth, our courage, celebrating our humanity, our love. And we're going to hit a reset button on our identity to allow these brand new energies to integrate. We'll hit a reset button on our self-concept. A reset button on our reality and our belief structures. And then let's imagine that we send out a spiritual text message to everybody we know, updating them, informing them of our next steps, our growth. And just kind of tune in to see if there's any other ways that you can support your nervous system, support your body,